Golden Age R&B singers who died in poverty. Before we begin, I need you to understand something about the era we are entering tonight. The Golden Age of R&B produced voices that shaped everything that came after: soul, rock and roll, pop, country. Every genre that followed stood on a foundation these artists poured. And most of them received almost nothing for building it. These are 12 Golden Age R&B singers who died in poverty, not because they lacked greatness, not because the music wasn't exceptional, but because the industry around them was designed to take. And these 12 gave everything there was to take. Number 12, Percy Mayfield. This is a man most people know by song, but almost no one knows by face. Because in 1952, a car crash took the face he had, left him disfigured, left him limited, left him unable to do the thing his career had been built on: standing on a stage and letting people see him while he sang. Percy Mayfield was born in 1920 in Minden, Louisiana. He was called the Poet Laureate of the Blues, and it was not a courtesy title. The man wrote with a precision and an emotional weight that set him apart from nearly every songwriter working in rhythm and blues. In 1950, he released "Please Send Me Someone to Love" on Specialty Records. It hit number 1 on the R&B chart and stayed on the chart for 27 weeks. Not just a hit, a standard. A song that generations of artists would record in the decades that followed, because the language Mayfield used inside it was that true and that permanent. And then the car crash came, 2 years later, and the face he had before it was gone. Percy Mayfield did not stop. He wrote. That is what he had left, and he used it without complaint. In 1961, he wrote "Hit the Road, Jack" for Ray Charles. It went to number 1 on both the pop and R&B charts and became one of the defining recordings of the decade. Ray Charles received the acclaim and the performance, and Mayfield received songwriter credit and royalties. But the stage career, the full recognition that comes with a performing presence, those were taken from him on that road in 1952. He continued to record, he continued to write, he gave this music thousands of pages of himself. And on August 11, 1984, one day before his 64th birthday, Percy Mayfield died, having fallen, again, into obscurity. The words those who followed him used were precise. He died having again fallen into obscurity. The Poet Laureate, remembered by almost no one outside of those who had already been paying attention. His name is not where it belongs. His face you may not recognize, but the song survived him, and that is not the same thing as surviving. If this name is new to you, that is not your fault, but it does not have to stay that way. Percy Mayfield gave this music a language it still speaks in. He deserved a different ending than the one he received. Number 11, Big Maybelle. This is a woman whose name should appear at the beginning of every conversation about what this music cost the people who made it. Maybelle Louise Smith was born on May 1, 1924, in Jackson, Tennessee. She learned gospel before she learned anything else. Learned it with full force, the way you learn things that are going to carry you for a lifetime. And carry her it did. By the early 1950s, she was performing as Big Maybelle, and her voice was the kind of instrument that audiences did not forget. A deep, sweeping contralto that could pull a room toward it without effort. In 1952, she signed with OK Records and released Gabbin' Blues, a top 5 R&B hit. It was the beginning of what should have been a sustained run at the center of this music story. In 1955, Big Maybelle went into the studio and recorded Whole Lotta Shakin' Goin' On. The young Quincy Jones produced the session. She put the song on wax 2 years before anyone else had touched it. She was the first. And then Jerry Lee Lewis recorded his version in 1957, and the world shook, and Lewis became a legend, and Big Maybelle, who had felt the song first, who had recorded it first, became a footnote in someone else's story. Her Candy, on Savoy Records in 1956, was a genuine hit. She kept recording, but heroin had found her. The way it found so many artists of that era who were given neither the guidance nor the protection to survive the industry that was using them. By the late 1960s, she was performing on an irregular basis. The good years, as those who were present said plainly, were long gone. She died on January 23, 1972, in Cleveland, Ohio, of a diabetic coma. She was 47 years old. If this name was in your house growing up, if your people knew what Big Maybelle sounded like when she was at full power, then you already understand what I am saying. Talent of that scale deserved a different ending. It deserved more than a footnote on someone else's record. Real talk. Only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's $1 coffee a month, and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it. Number 10, Amos Milburn. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, one of the most commercially successful artists in rhythm and blues, 4 number-1 hits on the R&B chart. A piano style that defined what boogie-woogie meant in the post-war South, an influence on artists who went on to become legends themselves. And a career that alcohol, the same alcohol he celebrated in song, took apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to take. Amos Milburn was born on April 1, 1927, in Houston, Texas, one of 13 children. By 5, he was playing piano by ear. He enlisted in the Navy at 15, served in the Pacific Theater, came home, put together a 16-piece band, and by 1946 had signed with Aladdin Records in Los Angeles. What followed was 11 years of sustained commercial success that few artists of that era matched. Chicken Shack Boogie, Bewildered, Roomin' House Boogie, Bad Bad Whiskey, 4 songs that each climbed to number 1 on the R&B chart. The Boogie Woogie King of Texas, the man who influenced the piano styles of the generation that came after him, Fats Domino, Little Richard, a generation of performers who took what he had established and built careers on the foundation. And I want to pause here and name something, because there is a pattern on this list. Songs becoming the foundation of other people's legacies, artists whose creative work was the raw material from which other careers were constructed. There is one name still ahead on this list where that pattern is most precisely documented, where the specific song, written by the specific artist, was recorded by someone else, and that other person's career was built on it, while the songwriter died with almost nothing. We will get there. Back to Amos Milburn. When rock and roll arrived and the labels moved toward it, they moved past him. The alcohol that his songs had always celebrated became the force that consumed him. His career ended. His health followed. In 1969, while playing a club in Cincinnati, Amos Milburn suffered a stroke. In 1970, a second, more severe stroke put him in a wheelchair. His old friend Johnny Otis came to him in 1972 to help him record. By then, Milburn's left hand could no longer function properly. Otis played the left-hand piano parts for him. In 1979, circulation problems caused by the strokes led to the amputation of one of his legs. He died on January 3, 1980, in Houston, Texas, the city where he was born. He was 52 years old. The music he made in those 11 years of brilliance survived him completely. The man who made it did not survive, and those are not the same outcome. Amos Milburn deserved recognition while he could still feel the keys under his hands. He deserved to leave this world with something in it. Number 9, Smiley Lewis. He spent his career watching other artists have bigger hits with his music than he did. Not because he lacked talent, not because the songs were wrong, because of the specific way the radio landscape of the 1950s was built, and whose voices it chose to amplify into the mainstream, and whose it chose to leave behind. His name was Smiley Lewis, and he died 3 days before the people of New Orleans could even write him a check. Overton Amos Lemons was born on July 5, 1913, in DeQuincy, Louisiana. As a teenager, he rode a freight train to New Orleans and never looked back. By the early 1950s, he was one of the central architects of the city's sound, a rolling, booming voice that sat perfectly above the piano triples and horn lines that defined New Orleans R&B. The The Bells Are Ringing in 1952 was his first national hit, and in 1955, I Hear You Knocking, a major R&B record that moved across every dance floor that mattered. But here is what the industry gave back in return. A pop version of I Hear You Knocking by Gayle Storm went top 5 on the pop chart, while Smiley's original stayed on the R&B side. Elvis Presley recorded Lewis's own One Night, cleaned up the lyrics slightly, and took it to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. Fats Domino covered Lewis's Blue Monday and made it famous, song after song. Other voices, other faces, other paychecks, and Smiley Lewis, the man who had been there first, stayed in New Orleans while the royalties went somewhere else. And I will say clearly what most people won't. This was not simply bad luck. The radio infrastructure of the 1950s was built to route certain sounds and certain voices around the mainstream and into the hands of performers the industry found more marketable. Smiley Lewis had the voice, the material, and the originality. What he did not have was a system willing to let him be heard where the money was. He kept recording, he kept performing, and in 1965, he was hospitalized. The diagnosis they expected was an ulcer. Surgery revealed stomach cancer. His friend and producer Dave Bartholomew organized a benefit concert to be held October 10, 1966, so that the New Orleans music community could give this man what decades of the industry had not. Smiley Lewis died on October 7, 1966, 3 days before the benefit, in the arms of his wife Dorothy, whom he had married 6 months before. He never received the money. The city had been ready to come for him, and the 3 days were not there. 3 days of timing, of a disease that moved faster than the community's love could reach him. That is not just sad, it is the precise shape of the injustice this channel was built to name. Number 8, Tampa Red. This is the man they called the Guitar Wizard. He was born Hudson Woodbridge around 1903 or 1904 in Smithville, Georgia. He moved to Chicago and stayed. And over the next 30 years, Tampa Red became something more than a recording artist. He became the center of what the city's blues community was. His home on the South Side was the place where musicians landed when they arrived in Chicago with nothing. They rehearsed there, they stayed there, they learned the industry there. Big Bill Broonzy, Robert Nighthawk, Muddy Waters, Elmore James. Many of the artists who went on to define Chicago electric blues passed through the world that Tampa Red maintained and made available. He gave what he had to every musician who came through the door. And his recordings were significant in their own right. More than 335 songs across a 30-year career. His 1949 recording of When Things Go Wrong With You, known as It Hurts Me Too, became a blues standard that Elmore James later covered and made famous, that B.B. King recorded, that Fats Domino recorded. Songs he wrote and performed became the building blocks of other artists' legacies. And then Tampa Red's wife, Frances, died in 1953. And the man who had held a community together came apart in her absence. The drinking that had always been present became consuming. The musicians he had housed moved on. The sound had shifted toward the harder Memphis electric blues, and Tampa Red's polished Chicago style was suddenly old. By the time blues scholar Jim O'Neill found him in 1974, living on the South Side with an 81-year-old companion, Tampa Red's national steel guitar had been stolen. O'Neill tracked it to a pawn shop. The guitar was eventually sold to a museum for $85,000. Tampa Red never saw any of that money. He spent his final years in Central Nursing Home in Chicago. On March 19, 1981, Tampa Red died. The historical documentation uses a specific word: not broke, not struggling, destitute. The guitar wizard died destitute. The Blues Foundation inducted him into their Hall of Fame that same year. The same year. Recognition and a nursing home death in the same calendar year. This name deserves to be in your memory after today. The man who gave the Chicago blues community a home while it was becoming what it is, and received a nursing home in return. Number 7. Professor Longhair. The man they called Fess, the man without whose piano style, New Orleans music, as the world knows it, would not exist. Fats Domino, Alan Toussaint, Dr. John, Art Neville, Huey Smith, every one of them has named Professor Longhair as the foundation they built on. And the man who built that foundation spent the 1960s working as a janitor in the city that owed him everything, loading boxes at a music store, playing cards to keep himself alive. Henry Rowland Bird was born on December 19, 1918, in Bogalusa, Louisiana, and raised in New Orleans. He learned to play on a piano with missing keys, and that detail matters. The gaps in the instrument became part of his approach, an improvisational relationship with structure that came directly from working around what was absent. By the late 1940s, he had a signature sound that defined what the city's music felt like. In 1950, Bald Head reached number 5 on the R&B chart. Mardi Gras in New Orleans became the unofficial anthem of the city's most celebrated tradition, and Tipatina, recorded in 1953, became so embedded in the city's identity that a nightclub would later be named after it. And then the industry moved past New Orleans and left Professor Longhair behind with it. By the early 1960s, his career had folded completely. The man who had shaped the sound of a city was not being paid to play music. He was cleaning floors and loading boxes. He was gambling at card tables to cover rent. The city did not forget him, but it was not yet ready to account for what it owed. In 1970, festival organizer Quint Davis went looking for him. What Davis found was a frail man who didn't look capable of playing the instrument he had once played with such force. With help, Professor Longhair recovered. He performed at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. He began to tour again. And in 1979, he signed with Alligator Records to record his first full album, Crawfish Fiesta, the most ambitious recording of his career. He was 61 years old, and recognition was finally arriving. Professor Longhair died on January 30th, 1980. Crawfish Fiesta was released the following day. He never heard what the world had to say about it. Talent without documentation is just genius with no witnesses. Fess had witnesses, but they came too late to change what his life had cost him. The album that finally gave him his proper platform arrived one day after he left. Hold this name. After tonight, it belongs in your memory. Number 6. Ivory Joe Hunter. Born October 10, 1914, in Kirbyville, Texas. Ivory Joe was his given name, not a stage name, not a nickname. His mother sang gospel. His father played guitar. He made his first recording for Alan Lomax and the Library of Congress as a teenager. In 1933. By the late 1940s, he was a working recording artist on the West Coast. In 1950, I Almost Lost My Mind hit #1 on the R&B chart, a song that was later covered by Pat Boone for a pop chart topper. In 1956, Since I Met You Baby, which Hunter also wrote, became his only top 40 pop hit. He received a gold record for it on The Ed Sullivan Show. He was, briefly, exactly where he had worked to be. And by the early 1960s, the R&B market had shifted away from him. He moved toward country music, performed at the Grand Ole Opry, attempted to bridge genres in a way that anticipated artists who would do the same thing decades later. He kept writing. Some estimates suggest he wrote more than 7,000 songs across his career. 7,000. Songs for himself, songs for others. 2 of them recorded by Elvis Presley. His catalog was vast and documented and real. And then came the lung cancer, and the months of intensive care. And with intensive care came the specific financial reality that intensive care creates for a man, without the resources to absorb it. The bills mounted. The expenses went beyond what the catalog and the career had left him with. As one documented account states directly, Hunter's declining health brought mounting medical bills that eventually drained his financial resources entirely. He did not have enough funds to pay for his own care. In October 1974, a tribute concert was held in his honor in New Orleans, people gathering to celebrate what he had given the music. Ivory Joe Hunter died on November 8, 1974. He was 60 years old. His funeral was held in his hometown of Kirbyville, Texas, the place where he had been born as a boy named Ivory Joe who could already play piano before most children his age had started school. "7,000 songs, a gold record, a tribute on national television, and bills that the career he had built could not cover at the end. And whether or not the industry made that happen consciously, I think you already know the answer. Number 5. Clyde McPhatter. He is responsible, in a way that can be documented and measured, for how R&B singing sounds in this country. The gospel-drenched tenor that became the template for soul music. The emotional architecture, the reach into registers that feel spiritual rather than mechanical, that made Sam Cooke possible, that made Jackie Wilson possible, that made an entire tradition of male R&B vocal performance into what it became. This man is Clyde McPhatter, and he died at 39 years old, broke and despondent, in a Bronx apartment before the institution that would honor him twice was even constructed. Clyde Lindsley McPhatter was born on November 15, 1932, in Durham, North Carolina. He was the son of a minister. He grew up in the church, which is where the voice came from, that quality of reaching towards something beyond the immediate, that emotional stretch that gospel demands and pop music borrows. In the early 1950s, he joined Billy Ward and the Dominoes as lead tenor and became largely responsible for their early success. When he left to form his own group in 1953, Clyde McPhatter and the Drifters recorded Money Honey. It hit number 1 on the R&B chart and stayed on the chart for 23 weeks. That was the beginning. His solo career brought A Lover's Question in 1958 and Lover Please in 1962, a top 10 pop single. At his best, Clyde McPhatter was one of the most gifted singers alive, and I want to be precise about this. His influence was not vague or general. The artists who came after him, specific, named artists who are in every Hall of Fame, acknowledged him directly. His is the voice at the origin of the sound. But the music was shifting, and the personal struggles deepened. Alcoholism took hold in the early 1960s. Label relationships collapsed. He moved to England to find audiences willing to receive him. When that also proved temporary, he returned to the United States and recorded a final album for Decca, titled Welcome Home. It went nowhere. A journalist who spoke with him in that period documented his words precisely. He told her, "I have no fans." Those were among his final words on record about his own career. A man who had given the music what it needed to become what it is, telling a journalist he had no fans. On June 13, 1972, Clyde McPhatter died in a Bronx apartment from complications of heart, liver, and kidney disease caused by chronic alcoholism. He was 39 years old. The historical documentation describes him as broke and despondent over a mismanaged career that made him a legend but hardly a success. That is the specific phrase. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted him posthumously in 1987, 15 years after he died, and then inducted him again as a member of the Drifters, twice. The institution gave him its highest honor twice, and he received neither of those honors while he was alive. Let me be clear about what I am saying. This man gave the culture something it could not have built on its own timeline without him. The way soul music sounds, the gospel reach, the emotional architecture, Clyde McPhatter helped construct that foundation. And the culture used what he built and moved past him, and he died at 39 without the resources to take care of himself. That is not a tragedy, it is a verdict, and it needed to be said. Number 4, Esther Phillips. She was 14 years old when she stood in front of a microphone and demonstrated that she was one of the most gifted singers of her generation. 14, in 1949, and the industry treated that gift the way it often treated gifts it found in young black women in that era. It took what it needed, applied it for as long as it was useful, and moved on. Her name was Esther Phillips, and when she died in 1984, she was placed in an unmarked pauper's grave. She was born Esther Mae Jones on December 23, 1935, in Galveston, Texas. Her parents separated when she was young, and she moved between her father in Houston and her mother in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles. In 1949, at 14 years old, she won an amateur talent contest at a club owned by Johnny Otis. He was so struck by what he heard that he recorded her immediately and put her in his traveling review under the name Little Esther. In 1950, her debut year as a recording artist, she released 3 #1 R&B hits, Double Crossing Blues, Mistrustin' Blues, and Cupid's Boogie. 3 #1s in 12 months. At 15 years old, Billboard named Johnny Otis's review the R&B Act of the Year for 1950, and this teenage girl was the voice that made that designation possible. And then the labels began to cycle, and the years began to carry their weight. And the addiction, heroin, found her the way it found so many artists of that era who were given neither the guidance nor the protection to navigate what was being done to them. She always came back. That is part of what made her exceptional and part of what made her story so painful to sit with. In the 1960s, Release Me gave her a new moment. In 1973, Home Is Where the Hatred Is earned her a Grammy nomination. In 1975, her recording of What a Difference a Day Makes became an international bestseller, and she appeared on the first season of Saturday Night Live. There were brilliant returns across 4 decades, but the addiction never fully released its hold, and the industry, which had benefited from her talent since she was a teenager, had no institutional memory of what it owed her. Esther Phillips died on August 7, 1984. She was 48 years old. Liver and kidney failure from long-term drug use. Her funeral services were conducted by Johnny Otis, the same man who had first heard her sing 35 years before, when she was still a child. She was buried at Lincoln Memorial Park in Compton, California, in an unmarked pauper's grave. A fundraiser organized by Johnny Otis in 1985 allowed her to be reinterred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills. A bronze marker now recognizes her career. That marker, the acknowledgement that this person existed and what she gave, was paid for by charity 1 year after she died. Number 3, Little Willie John recorded Fever before anyone else. In 1956, a 20-year-old from Cullendale, Arkansas, stood in front of a King Records microphone and made a recording that Peggy Lee would remake into one of the definitive pop standards of the 20th century, 2 years later. He had 14 R&B chart entries before he was 26 years old. And he died at 30 in a prison in Walla Walla, Washington, with James Brown recording a tribute album in his honor because there was nothing else anyone could do for him. William Edward John was born on November 15, 1937, in Cullendale, Arkansas. His family moved to Detroit when he was 4. He sang gospel as a child, won talent contests as a teenager, and at 18 was signed to King Records in Cincinnati. His first record, All Around the World, reached number 5 on the R&B chart in 1955, and then, in 1956, Fever, number 1 R&B, more than 1 million copies sold. A song that Peggy Lee would hear in 1958 and reimagine for a pop audience, and that most people to this day associate with Lee's version rather than the 20-year-old who sang it first. He kept recording Talk to Me, Sleep, 14 total chart entries in less than a decade. King Records dropped him in 1963. The label had grown tired of what the drinking had brought to the sessions and to the performances. And without the label, without the structure, without the income, the instability deepened into something irreversible. In October 1964, Little Willie John performed at a club in Seattle. After the show, there was a confrontation outside. A much larger man struck him. Little Willie John, 5 feet 4 inches tall, responded with a knife. The man died. In 1966, Little Willie John was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8 to 20 years at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. He was visited there. Aretha Franklin came. James Brown came. People who knew what he had meant to the music came and sat with him. And none of it, none of the love, none of the presence, could change what was happening to his body inside those walls. On May 26, 1968, Little Willie John died inside the Washington State Penitentiary. He was 30 years old. The death certificate lists a heart attack. The accounts from the period include pneumonia left untreated, violence, neglect. No investigation was ever completed that established exactly what happened. James Brown released the tribute album. The questions stayed open. That landed. I know it did. Take a second. a voice that James Brown, thought deserved a tribute album. And he died at 30 in a cell in eastern Washington, dropped by the label that had used him, abandoned by the system that had taken what it needed. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted him in 1996, 28 years after he died in that institution. They gave him a plaque. He deserved a life. Number 2, Arthur Big Boy Crudup. This name deserves to be spoken slowly. Arthur William Big Boy Crudup, born in Forest, Mississippi in 1905. Grew up a son of migrant workers moving through the South. Learned to play guitar in his 30s. By 1940, he had moved to Chicago. And by the mid-1940s, he was recording for the RCA Bluebird label, putting more than 80 songs on record in his early years with them. Among those songs, That's All Right Mama, recorded in 1946, and My Baby Left Me, and So Glad You're Mine. Songs that would eventually be recorded by a young man named Elvis Presley, and that would help light the fuse on everything that came after in popular music. This is the story I was describing. The pattern I named at number 10 of songs becoming the foundation of other careers, other legacies, other fortunes, this is where it is most precisely documented. That's All Right Mama was written by Arthur Crudup. It was the song Elvis Presley recorded in 1954 as one of his first commercial recordings. The song that launched the career that changed American music, and Arthur Crudup received almost nothing from the success that song generated. You know the song. It has been part of the culture's story for 7 decades. But knowing the song and knowing what it cost to make it, those are 2 different kinds of knowing. Let me give you the second one. The contracts that bound Arthur Crudup to his record label were, like the contracts of that era for so many black artists, designed to ensure that the revenue generated by his music flowed primarily away from him. He signed what he was given. He did not have the legal representation or the education to understand what was being asked of him, and the machine that used what he created had no obligation to explain it. In the late 1960s, a promoter named Dick Waterman took up his cause, worked to secure a settlement from the publishing company that held his contracts. They came within reach of a $60,000 payment, and then the lawyers blocked it. Waterman told Crudup he would keep fighting. He would make them pay. Arthur Crudup looked at him and spoke slowly. He said, "I know you done the best you could. I respects you and I honors you in my heart. But it just ain't meant to be." In 1970, Arthur Crudup said publicly, and I want to be precise about this, because it is one of the most specific statements any artist on this list ever made about their own situation. "I was born poor, I live poor, and I am going to die poor." He was right. On March 28, 1974, Arthur Big Boy Crudup died of heart disease and diabetes at a hospital in Nassau, Virginia. He had spent his final years running a small juke joint and picking peas and strawberries in the fields of Virginia to cover basic expenses. After his death, his estate eventually recovered more than $3 million in unpaid royalties. He never saw a dollar of it. Elvis Presley, who knew exactly what he had taken from this tradition, once said, "If I had any ambition, it was to be as good as Arthur Crudup." That sentence is the precise measurement of the gap between what was owed and what was given. A legendary artist acknowledged the debt. The man to whom it was owed died in the field. Number 1, Big Mama Thornton, 150 seconds. Before I tell you what the industry did to this woman, I need to tell you who she was, because that is the part that makes everything else hurt. Willie Mae Thornton was born on December 11, 1926, in Ayrton, Alabama. Her father was a Baptist minister. Her mother sang in the choir. She learned her voice inside the gospel tradition, inside a sound that demands everything from the body and gives everything back in return. She taught herself harmonica and drums. She left home at 14 for the road. And by her 20s, she was one of the most commanding live performers on the entire R&B circuit. A voice that filled rooms the way weather fills a room. Physical, inevitable, earned. In August of 1952, she stood in a studio in Los Angeles with the Johnny Otis Band, and 2 young songwriters handed her a song they had written specifically to suit her personality. Brusque and badass, as one of them later described it. The song was Hound Dog. You know this song, but knowing the song and knowing what it cost to make it, those are 2 different kinds of knowing. Let me give you the second one. Thornton's recording of Hound Dog was released in February 1953 on Peacock Records. It hit number 1 on the R&B chart. It stayed there for 7 weeks. It spent 14 weeks total on the chart and sold over 500,000 copies. And then Elvis Presley recorded it in 1956, and his version spent 11 weeks at number 1 across pop, R&B, and country simultaneously. And Thornton reportedly received 1 check for $500. That is the number the historical record provides. $500 for the foundation on which everything else was built. And I need you to stay with me, because this is not where the story ends. Thornton wrote her own songs. Ball and Chain, a slow, devastating blues she had been performing since the early 1960s, was heard by Janis Joplin. Joplin's performance of it at the 1967 Monterey Pop Festival became one of the defining moments of that era. The song Thornton wrote became the platform from which Joplin launched herself into legend. Two songs, Hound Dog for Elvis, Ball and Chain for Janis. 2 careers that each carry this woman's original mark. And she received almost nothing in return for either one. No royalties, not even from the reissues of her music that were actively selling in her final years. Living almost penniless in a Los Angeles boarding house. The culture had taken what it needed and left no forwarding address. On July 25, 1984, Willie Mae Thornton was found dead in that rooming house. She was 57 years old. That same year, the same calendar year, the Blues Foundation inducted her into their Hall of Fame. I know. I felt the same way when I sat with this. Twice. She gave it to the culture twice. Not small things. Two of the most recognizable recordings in American music carry her original mark. And when she left, there was a boarding house and a body the years had worn down, and almost nothing else. This is the name I built toward since the beginning. Willie Mae Thornton. Say it slowly. It belongs in your memory long after this ends.